Good afternoon and welcome to the latest edition of Shooting Straight with me, Voice of the Forge. Usually I say this at the end of a show. Today I'm putting this at the beginning just so that people may or may not have missed it. Basically, if you have any concerns or questions, please feel free to either tweet me at Voice of the Forge or leave a comment below the video so that you can become part of the process. At the moment, pretty much all the videos I've been doing have been things that have either had a direct impact on what I've been viewing and had to research or understanding, or they've been concerns raised in the group of Forgotten Forge games. They're things that people have come to me and asked questions about. So if I can extend that to a wider community, I would be only too happy to do so. So please let me know things that you're interested in and things that you may want to see discussed, and hopefully once we get a little bit more settled in what we're doing, we can then start to have alternative voices through Skype calls and the like, so that we can actually do some interviews with different voices as well. Now, this week has been a bit of a strange week. We have seen the undubitable success of the Protein World ad campaign. And this has been despite the fact that we've had a group of social justice warriors complaining about the advert featuring a bikini-clad model who is quite pretty and quite slim, with the slogan, "Are you beach body ready?" Now, this has obviously been taken to be fat shaming and to be against the mantra of everybody is beautiful in their own way, to the extent that they have actually sent death threats and physical threats of violence to the company. However, the company is totally unrepentant, saying, "We're not going to listen to you because you're not our core market." Our core market has responded, and we've made over £1 million in 4 days with 2,000 extra followers, 5,000 extra orders, and all this other good stuff. So yeah, we're not going to play your game because you've been good for us. So that in itself is very much a positive outcome. But I want to temper this with something that has been put forward by one of our members at Forgotten Forge Games, who had completely missed a whole section of gaming history and had actually come across things which were news to him about the fact that it is possible to manage an outrage falsely so that you can garner attempts at forging a narrative that you want to see for your product. And what they chose to link into this was Grand Theft Auto, and the fact that they had links with Max Clifford. Now, I haven't linked to the original video, but part of this is a response to the video that they shared to me, and basically they were claiming that it proved that Gamergate itself was nothing more than people having strings pulled and making us little more than reactionary puppets. Now, I take exception to this for a number of different reasons. Now, the first thing is that the information provided on Grand Theft Auto is not new. This is old news, but it's something they hadn't come across. The stuff that was actually being used is at least 2 years old, and whilst not everything is known about the fact that Max Clifford was being involved, the fact that there was a certain amount of controversy which was stoked and which gave the game notoriety is obviously understood. Now, one of the main facts that the video actually got wrong was the fact that the game was retooled halfway through its development because it wasn't enough fun. In fact, what the game actually happened being was that there was a certain bug which meant that the police in the game kept bugging out and going haywire. And it was due to the investigation of this bug and the fact that people had fun trying to make this bug trigger that gave us the original core gameplay of the original Grand Theft Auto. So that's the first factual bit of information that this particular video got wrong. The next, whilst it talks about Carmageddon and Grand Theft Auto and the using of outrage in order to push a marketing appeal for games, we must remember the climate at which these games came out in, where we actually had Mortal Kombat almost single-handedly become the poster child for the ESRB in America. Games before this had fallen into the remit in the UK of the BBFC, and it must be remembered that Rockstar North, as it became after the success of Grand Theft Auto, was made by Rockstar North, which is Scotland based. So that meant that it fell under a completely different regime to that of the Americans. And whilst there was a certain amount of manufactured outrage in order to control sales, this did have a negative impact elsewhere. So to say that it drove sales completely and using game theory to say that we're all puppets, to me is a vast oversimplification. Now, in Germany, for instance, Carmageddon, you couldn't have people being run over. If I remember correctly, the blood had to be replaced with green blood, and the overarching narrative was changed that you weren't running people over, you were running zombies over. Other places had other definitions of the violence that couldn't be accepted, and this was obviously a decision made in something that wasn't a zero-sum game. So, whilst the use of game theory has been attributed to this use of puppetry, the same could be said for anything in which you are using game theory which is using an asymmetric system of information. And this, unfortunately, fails to fall under some of the key tenets of game theory, which I'll go into in a bit. Because technically, what we're talking about here is interactive decision theory, which is the precursor to game theory. Now, as this has been linked to outrage with Gamergate, people forget that there was a number of factors that led up to this. Now, he was saying that basically the Gamergate controversy was being controlled so that we would react to it, and therefore games like Hatred would then get much more press. So I then wanted to use the example of Seedscape, which is where the established people wanted to actually ban a game and not get it greenlit because the developer in question didn't fit in with their mores and didn't fit in with what they wanted them to stand for. And yet, thanks to Gamergate, the game got greenlit and it's well on its way to being produced. So, are we puppets or aren't we? Well, at any time where someone is said to have more information than somebody else, there can be an element of manipulation. Which is why insider stock market trading is banned, because in that scenario, having information that you're not entitled to is not seen as a good thing. It's asymmetric information, and at any time when the information is asymmetric, you can manipulate people into doing certain things. And this comes down to the core of the information, to the infamous Zoe post with Aaron, and the fact that he blew the whistle. There was information that we did not know about a collusion of journalists, which was later verified with the Game Journal Pro's mailing list, about a non-disclosure of ethics and a closed cabal. The fact that this very same closed cabal published several articles within hours of each other claiming that gamers were dead, that the gamer industry was over, gamers didn't need to be a necessary market, bearing in mind these were writing for gaming websites, led us to start digging for terms of collusion. So when you start looking at collusion, if we are being gamed, like with the Grand Theft Auto incident, then you have someone pushing a narrative and people that are swallowing said narrative without being critical of it. And oh look, that's exactly what we've got with Gamergate. We have a mainstream media narrative which is vilifying people to project a certain case study, like with honey badgers being called out as being a hate group, being removed from Calgary Expo, the fact that we've got all the issues that we've had with sad puppies because we have had an elite pushing a narrative to try and force other people out of the industry, or to stop people coming into an industry, or to control the industry to such an extent that if you don't buy into the current hive mind groupthink, that you aren't worthy enough and haven't paid your dues. And we can also see this where we have games that bomb but have been critically appraised. Games like Gone Home, Depression Quest. This is where we have had an asymmetrical amount of information trying to force an agenda on an unsuspecting populace. But as you've noticed, not all of these things have happened in the same way. They've not all had the same coverage, and they've not all had a positive impact. Protein World stood by its guns, stuck two fingers up to the current outrage market, and have made a mint. When people have been promoted by the system, and other people have tried it and gone, you know what, that was really weak, I didn't enjoy it at all, it was pathetic, it was useless, it was horrible, it's then kind of backfired, and then they've had to spin this narrative of, well, you didn't like it because you're not this, or you didn't like it because you're not that. Who are you to speak from your privileged position? You've got to check your privilege. You've got to gerrymander the arguments in a different way in order for that failed narrative structure to have made any sense. Now, I've talked a lot about this asymmetric information and everything else, and this comes from game theory, which was developed from interactive design theory, interactive decision theory. And basically what it was interactive decision theory was a mathematical model put together to try and work out how people would behave in a certain way based on certain data sets. And at first, the initial theory stood its ground, but then they found that the real world often violated the model because not everybody involved in it behaved in a rational manner, and for it to make sense, the decisions had to be rational. This gave birth to evolutionary game theory, which doesn't rely on rational responses, and is used now in fields for both biological and cultural decisions in terms of the way in which these things evolve. And again, this isn't a strictly Darwinist kind of evolution. This is where you're using evolution in a specific sense in order to see that data coming out of a certain way of behaving can be actually read and predictions made. But again, there's nothing there about manipulating the data set in evolutionary game theory. This is how, if you put certain values in, you get certain values out, and you can make a prediction based on ranking probabilities. So you can say if input A is put in or input B is put in, we can get inputs C, D or E depending on the weighting. But again, this all comes down to information. And you've also heard me mention zero-sum game. Now, a zero-sum game is where the only way one player can benefit is at the detriment of another or more players. So a zero-sum game means that you've literally got 10 points to spread around in an area, and if you've got 10 people, then the only way someone can have more than 1 point is if someone loses theirs. Basically, it's an enclosed system, which means that the variables are much more strictly managed, and there's much more inference can be drawn because you've got a much more tight data set to work with. Now, advertising is not a zero-sum game. You can spend $50 million or £50 million on an advertising campaign and have it fall completely flat because research wasn't done on the demographic, research wasn't done on the target consumer, the actual person who would buy this product or the problem it's meant to solve hasn't been fully researched, so you don't know who, what, why people will buy this. And sometimes it can be too late to market, and therefore you've lost things like first mover advantage, and somebody has already out-competed you in a different field. This is all information that would take part in game theory. Now, the reason I keep going on about asymmetric information as well is the fact that if you're trying to push a narrative and push people to behaving in a certain way, you don't give them all the facts. If you want people to leave a building quietly and without rushing, you turn around and say, there's a problem, we've got an electrical fault on our fire alarm, could you please exit the building until such time as we can have the fire alarm repaired? If you could all please make an orderly way out of the exits, and we will get this resolved as soon as possible. That will incur a certain level of collusion with the people that you're trying to get out of the building without panicking them. The last thing you want to do is get over a tannoy and say, will everyone please leave the building, we've had a bomb threat, or we found a suspicious package and we believe it's a bomb, please leave quickly. One induces panic, which then countermands the effect that you're trying to achieve. You've still got exactly the same information as the person knowing that there's a bomb in the building. The customers, however, don't. So you have information that they don't have, which is asymmetric. And this is what this proposed smoking gun on how we're being controlled by the mainstream media came about. Now, obviously, if you're involved in Gamergate, then you're not part of the mainstream media, because we're actually against the mainstream media narrative. We're the people turning around saying that we're all smelly, neckbeard, caveman-dwelling virgins who can't get laid in a month of Sundays. Which completely then whitewashes and denigrates things like Not Your Shield and everything else. So this is why I say that we're not being gamed and we're not falling victim to this mainstream narrative, because this is what Gamergate's been about. Was Jack Thompson a failure because he got disbarred and all the research spent over 30 years on violence in video games? No, he's obviously failed. And this is the point of that video, was the fact that this doesn't work. I think I've said as much as I can on this topic. This is going to be a slightly shorter one than usual, but I, as always, have been at Voice of the Forge, and thank you very much for listening.